Listen, I love reading books, as we know. I think you do too. And just like I love reading books, there are a myriad of things that I love reading about. From scenes to tropes to archetypes to dialogue, but I also have plenty of things that I hate reading about and that will quite literally put me off from reading the book, or that will kind of also bring down the rating for a book just because I don't like the execution of these things. So I asked you guys on Instagram, what are those things that you absolutely hate seeing in books? And we will not only discuss them today, but I will also provide my professional input and see if I agree or disagree, or if I can see kind of that middle ground. And I'm excited! Unsurprisingly to, I think, everyone, this is one of the most repeated ones, and it is, I hate the miscommunication trope. Like, just talk. And honestly, I agree. I've talked about this many times before, and it is not that I hate miscommunication as like an overall thing that happens, because miscommunication, I think, is a regular, normal part of like everyday life. I think it depends on several things. One, the fact that a lot of people are seeking escapism when they go to books, and seeing something so real as miscommunication reflect and affect so deeply the events of the book might take people out of the story, or it's simply something that people just don't want to read about, and I think that's completely fine. I also think that it depends on the execution of miscommunication, because I think more often than not we're seeing miscommunication in a third act breakup that is coincidentally one that a lot of people have also said third act breakups make me want to rip my hair off. So I'm going to pair these two together and say that typically miscommunication is seen in that third act breakup, which typically happens in the span of 10 to 20 pages, and both the conflict and the resolution make absolutely no sense. If the characters actually sat down to talk for 5 freaking minutes, they'd totally be able to solve whatever issue is coming up and move on with their lives as if nothing had happened. But it is this over dramatized moment that I think makes it so unappealing to read about. And so every single romance that I incidentally end up reading that has a miscommunication trope, I instantly get angry. I would love to see other types of conflicts be displayed in books. So yes, I agree. Miscommunication fucking sucks. Powerful female characters getting nerfed after getting a man losing powers and smarts. I think this is something we see predominantly in fantasy with female leads, and honestly, it's infuriating every single time, because can it have an emotional impact on the reader? Absolutely yes. Do I think that a lot of the time it's included in the book because of that? Yes. Do I also think that it's included sometimes because the character has served their purpose and they just want to live in peace, they don't want to be disturbed, this is like the end moment for the character of this is a burden and now I let it go, it is not mine to hold? Also, yes. But at the same time, I think the most infuriating part of it is that it is always the female character, or the female presenting character, letting go of her powers, but the male presenting characters never do. Like, they keep their powers and it is always completely fine and it doesn't pose any issues. And so I love reading fantasy books on the opposite end of that, where the female character actually keeps her powers but also saves the day alongside the crew, and everybody lives or not. Because it also happens, but you know, where they just live to see another day and she keeps her powers because they're hers. There's also a lot of power in that. A bad plot twist. And I agree that a bad plot twist can totally bring the book apart. Let me one up that though, because I think there's an even bigger evil than a bad plot twist, and it is a book that is not necessarily that good, but then when you get to the plot twist, it's amazing. A book cannot be as good as its plot twist, and it really grates on my nerves when I'm reading an incredibly mediocre book, then I get to the twist and I'm like, why are we wasting such a good twist on such a mediocre book? If there is anything that bugs me, it is that. Insta-love, hate it with a burning passion. I also agree. I think that insta-love immediately brings down the mood in a book. I personally don't like to read it. I know there are people who do because they like that very fast-paced romance where it manifests very quickly into the story. I personally like the, oh, this person's kind of cute, this person's kind of hot, and then the tension to keep building as the story goes. I love me a slow burn. I think there is a lot of of, you know, earning to be had at some point of the story. And then when it finally gets to that point of like breaking or release, however we want to call it, where the main characters actually get together, it's just so gratifying and satisfying that you kind of held up throughout the entirety of the book, reading about the actual plot, and then when that actually happens, it's just immensely satisfying. There is something almost unfinished, I think, about insta-love. There is something that leaves you kind of wanting for that yearning that is so, so good in books. And also, insta-love doesn't necessarily hold up that well throughout the rest of the story. I think it kind of takes away from the pacing and, again, from the tension of the story itself. So I think regardless of whether it's a fantasy, a sci-fi, or a romance, or a literary fiction, I just like it when it's slow burn. Even if the characters already know each other and they know each other very, very well, just give it to me slowly. I like that. Like, there's nothing better in this world than reading about those subtle glances, about the slight touches, about that I give and retract almost. Nothing beats it. It's so good. I have so much to say about this one because when I tell you guys, I've been over this. My formative years of reading, beside fantasy books, was Wattpad. Random pregnancy / baby tropes, especially when there's a war pending, is literally something that grates on my nerves so bad. The amount of paranormal romances I read while I was reading on Wattpad, particularly werewolf romances where they had to like fight the big bad. A war was incoming. We had to prepare ourselves because shit was about to get nasty. And literally as the fight is incoming, bitch finds out that she's pregnant, and then it's not only that, because then it just keeps on going. It's like this snowball effect. Not only is she pregnant, but then the alpha male is like, you can't go and you can't fight because you are pregnant. And then she goes ahead and she fights anyway. So now she is fighting with the baby. Listen, I fucking hate it. I hate it for so many reasons. It is so unnecessary. I hate every fucking second of it. Literally, keep it in the drafts. I have to disagree with this one, and I need y'all to tell me, because is this an unpopular opinion now? Third person POV. Third person POV is superior. I don't want to be in the head of no YA, no adult protagonist like that. I really just want to get that omniscient point of view where I get to see everything, because I can't just do one person. I don't like the subjective view of things, because then it also just like warps the mind of the reader as we are reading it. And there are many a thing that we perceive to like not be toxic, to not be bad, to perhaps be perceived as better than it actually is because we are in the head of the main character. And also, I'm sorry, but the amount of like whiny female characters, love them the most, but that's the truth, that we have seen firsthand and we have witnessed their brains and their thoughts. I don't need that. Just give me third person. I have too many questions. When a character has one trait that gets mentioned over and over, even when it's not relevant, yes. And you know what? It applies primarily, I think, in the way that I've seen it, physical looks. The person is blonde and tiny. This person is brunette and massive. And I'm like, why is there such an emphasis? Like, this really does not weigh into the story. We're over that. Like, what happened to the tall girls? What happened to the short kings? We need a little bit of everything. When the male protagonist calls the female protagonist baby girl, little, it makes her to be a child, and that is icky, and I personally agree. And I know not everybody is going to have the same opinion, because when it comes to pet names, every brain is its own universe and every person will like what they like. However, I do think it's infantilizing and I really don't love it. I also think there's something slightly condescending sometimes about babe, baby, little, baby girl. So I'm good with that. Let's just rather use like the darlings, sweethearts, honey. Honey can also be condescending sometimes, but like, you know, angel, like just, you know, let's switch it up. Let's use other ones. I think there are much more endearing allowing pet names to be used. Love corners. Two men love a woman, but she loves both. That shit is not a triangle, it's a corner. I call it the choo-choo train of love. I think we have completely lost the true meaning of a love triangle. Everybody needs to like each other. It's not just two people being in love with one person or one person being in love with two people. There's so much more to it than what we are being presented with. And so anytime I see any female lead fighting over two guys, I'm like, first of all, over it. Like, just what are we doing? Still fighting for men and men fighting each other? Like, what are we doing? Let it just be an equal round of love. There's so much love to give. And it can't really be clear who the main character or any of the other ones is going to end up with. I like the uncertainty. I like the trying to guess what's going to happen based on the events of the book. But most love triangles, you already know who the person is gonna end up with because it's fucking obvious. Long chapters. I agree with that. Listen, it's not that I hate them because I can appreciate them when they're needed. I think I appreciate books more when it's primarily shorter chapters, and then when it's needed for the action, for the tension, for any sort of story development, I appreciate the longer chapters because sometimes they're needed. However, when the entire book only has long chapters, it makes it feel like such a dragged out moment. Whereas the opposite with shorter chapters, I will read a page or two, 3 pages, 4 pages, and then when I'm done with that chapter, I'm like, I want more. And so I keep reading, and it sort of makes me propel through the book a lot faster rather than a long chapter, especially when I'm reading at night where I'm already fading. I need the shorter chapters because I don't like to leave the book or to put the book down mid-chapter. I don't like that. I know some people I don't like that. Pop culture references, and I agree with this. This is actually one that surprisingly came up a lot, and I was surprised because I thought that people really loved this, but I myself think that it dates a book. I think that it really sounds unnatural in the grand scheme of things. In fact, I was reading Lessons in Chemistry, and there was one particular sentence, I can't remember which one it was, but it made it sound so current for a book that was set in the 50s and the 60s that it kind of took me out of the story for just a little bit, because I think that you can tell, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that, when you can tell when a certain piece of literature was written, and I think there is a beauty to it as well. I think there's a space for books like that. But when it's such specific things like TikTok or a specific video or a specific meme, although I can understand what the author is trying to do and bring into the story, I just don't think in the grand scheme of the story it's necessary either. So I'm not wholly a fan of it. Children that talk like whole ass adults. And you know what? I agree with you. I think that I haven't necessarily seen it a lot in middle grade, if that's what this person was referring to. However, I see it a lot in YA. And young adult is one of those age groups that unfortunately nowadays is not really geared a lot of the time towards young adults, but rather adults. And it really saddens me as somebody who obviously grew up reading a lot of young adults, because I don't feel like it's geared towards the audience that it's intended to reach. And now a lot of the books that I am reading, they are skewing a lot older, and they read like adult books, from the pacing all the way to the dialogue, all the way to the interactions between characters, the conflict itself. And so I agree. In fact, with Six of Crows, which is a book I have DNF'd many a time, and I am looking forward to retrying it this year, Six of Crows was one of those books that the characters literally read like adults to me. And that was one of the reasons why I DNF'd Six of Crows, because I did not like that these teenagers did not read like teenagers, although I think we can argue that for basically most YA fantasy. So I think it's fascinating. I think it's a fascinating phenomenon. Cringy / unrealistic sexy. And it's whole boob and mouth? Girl, didn't you know that mouths are whole ass vacuums? Just listen, between the mouth and female genitalia, the vagina, some authors really write them as if they were fucking vacuums. I'm how are you not hurt? How are y'all okay? How are y'all taking that? Sometimes I genuinely think that romance authors are not really aware of how these things work because it is concerning, okay? The amount of times I have read about men going in dry, I'm like, that must burn, girl. Like, what are you doing? No. Amnesia trope that lasts way too long. I would just argue amnesia trope. I don't like it at all. I know for some instances, it again lends itself for a lot of like that angst and that tension and that buildup and the hope that the person will get their memory back. I personally hate it. I think I have seen it one too many times in like paranormal romances back when I was reading in Wattpad, the fantasy books. I really just do not like the amnesia trope. Also, with that, tying it in, not something I don't know, I haven't seen it so far. However, reincarnation is also one of my most hated tropes, and it really makes the whole relationship and the whole dynamic switch entirely to be dependent on that past connection. And I don't really love that. And so anything from amnesia to reincarnation, sometimes they go hand in hand. I am really not a fan of any of those. I hate the I'm bad for you, so we can't be together, but doesn't take any distance. After, is that you? Listen, I dislike this too. I think it really boils down to an incredibly toxic and messy dynamic. And there are books that their whole focus is to highlight that. So I think that it solely depends on the book. Like if the book is not pretending to be anything other than a toxic romance and exploring sort of the nuances of a relationship like that, I think it can be done very well. But if this is just like a typical like day-to-day romance, just girly things, I don't really love that. Because if you were really convinced that you were bad for this person, the best thing you could do is just take a step back. Or the person who is being told that the other person is bad for them, just make sure that they stay away, because if they're saying that, it's probably for a reason. Mentor to lovers. And I just have one, why? Why do you hate the good things in life? I personally love mentor to lovers. I think it is so good. The tension, I mean, listen, I think that particularly in a fantasy setting, it works for me. If it's like a contemporary romance, then like it can get a little bit, you know, kind of weird. But when the mentor is like age appropriate to the main character, I personally love it. I love, again, the tension from the training scenes, the fighting scenes, and then them actually admitting that they are into each other. I don't know why, but it gives me like ultimate Bucky Barnes vibes, even though that's not wholly accurate for every single book that might have this trope. Maybe it's Sebastian Stan in my head. Maybe that's the one thing corrupting me and altering my brain chemistry that's making me like this, but I like it. Mentioning specific songs that the character is listening to, like song name and artist to set the vibe. I am going to get so much shit for this. Because I know people love like the romance book playlist. I hate it. It's a very awful example I'm gonna give right now. Just bear with me, you know what I mean. But I just am not about to sit there reading the book and play Teenage Dream by Katy Perry just because the book is telling me to. Like, that's just not my vibe. It's the same way back when I was reading Wattpad, where I was reading, it's like DNA by Little Mix starts playing. I'm not about to listen to DNA. Like, I don't need that in my life. I don't want that in my life. I completely understand how it can do it for some people to like set the scene and set the vibe. I personally don't like it. I'm also the person who can't listen to any songs with lyrics while I am reading because otherwise I get distracted. So that might also factor into it. We are nearing the end, friends, but enemies to lovers where they do not actually hate each other. And I think this is kind of a two-parter for me because I love enemies to lovers. However, I do agree that sometimes when you're walking into a book with the expectation of the trope that is enemies to lovers, you don't actually get that. And so I completely understand how sometimes the switch and the very fast switch at that from enemies to lovers can be off-putting for some people. I think that the marketing of a book is even more important than that fast switch, because sometimes books are marketed as enemies to lovers and they're not. A lot of people pitch books as enemies to lovers, and they are not. A lot of the time, people pitch books with this trope, and the romance is not even at the forefront of the story. So I think it's a very layered answer, or a very layered why wouldn't you like it, whether it's the actual delivery that the book is providing, or whether it's because the way that it's being sold is not accurate to the actual content of the story. And I think for me, I have much more seen like the actual sell of the book, the pitch of the book being completely wrong, rather than the switch being too fast. Though I will say, there are some books where it's like barely noticeable that they're enemies, and then the switch is done and it's like definitely not worth the time. I also think that enemies to lovers is probably one of the tropes that sells the most, and so instead of pitching it as like a rivals to lovers or a hate to love or just a regular romance where people go from indifference to love, which is not even a trope, that's just their regular relationship, I think that's why they use that, because they know it'll sell. I love that somebody mentioned this one because this is one of my biggest pet peeves. I'm the best at it, but we never actually see them doing said thing they're so good at. I have read one too many books where the main character is supposed to be this amazing thief, amazing assassin, amazing something. They're the best of the realm. They have a very infamous reputation. Everybody knows their name and who they are, but they do not live up to that expectation, at least not in the first book, but that is a big selling point. And I absolutely hate the lack of delivery a lot of those pitches and books tend to give out, because I want to see it all. If you're like the baddest assassin, like give me John Wick, like come on, or grab your sword and just like do your thing, you know? I just really dislike being promised something and then not getting it. Just in general, as a general standard, don't promise me something you're not gonna give me. And then last but not least, she let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Listen, do I think it's a cliche and do I think it is cheesy? 100%. As an anxiety girly, I would like to argue not in favor of this scene, of this moment, of this sentence, but rather just say it happened. Many a time I have found myself in situations where I'm not really having the best time and I'm feeling really anxious, and sometimes, listen, I forget to breathe. So do I think it's an unrealistic thing to say? No. Is it overdone? Yes. And that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this installment of things I hate in books. Feel free to leave down below any and all other things that you hate to see in books that maybe weren't covered in the video. There were a lot of responses, a lot of overlap as well, so it was kind of hard to pick and choose what to include without the video being extremely long. So let a girl know down in the comments if there are any others that you absolutely hate to see. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe down below if you want more bookish content. I also have a podcast. It is called Talk and Talk. You can find that over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It is always linked down below alongside all of my socials. And another link you can find down in the description is that of Patreon, in case you want to support the channel further. Love you all so much, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, guys.